Nicole Girten, thanks for joining us on the Illinois Channel. As we are taping this, I'll tell the audience, the U.S. economy in the second quarter took the biggest hit ever, down 32.9%. And obviously, we are living in a world where the coronavirus is having an impact on virtually all walks of life. Some things, like the economy, I think no one was surprised by that. But we are going to be talking with Nicole, who has written an article for the IllinoisChannel.org, and we'll have that article with this. We'll have this video in connection with the article. And Nicole, you have looked at the impact of the coronavirus as it is having on something that may not be as obvious to people, and that is domestic violence. What have you found in your look at what's happening in that part of the world?
Sure. First, thank you so much for having me on the program. This is such an important issue, and I'm so thankful for the opportunity to speak about my reporting. So I looked at Chicago Police Department data from the data portal, and I looked between March 21st, which is when the stay-at-home order was put in place by Governor Pritzker, and June 1st, and compared the data from that range to 2019, and I found that there was actually a 46% decrease in the number of reported cases. However, when I spoke with experts, they told me that this is because victims weren't permitted to leave their homes. They couldn't leave their homes to report the violence they were experiencing. And that was a huge factor in why we saw that decrease. And there's been a lot of impact in the Chicago area.
And part of the issue, as I understand from your article, is what's happening with the court system. And the courts are not operating in the same way they were. We also have an impact, I think you said in your article, that the Cook County Jail was one of the hot spots of the nation for coronavirus. And so they're having people who otherwise would be locked up, perhaps for domestic violence, are not being locked up. How is that impacting those who are at risk of domestic violence?
Sure. I spoke with a defense attorney in Chicago named Matt Thackeray, and he told me of an instance with a client he had who had allegedly battered his wife. And he went before a judge, and because the judge factored in coronavirus into his decision making and decided to permit him to go back to the marital home because of the danger of catching the virus in prison or in jail. And Matt Thackeray actually told me that, he wouldn't think that that decision would be made that way had it not been for coronavirus.
When we are thinking about the coronavirus, or let me say that, when we are thinking about domestic violence, in most communities of any size, there are shelters where I would say exclusively women are going to. What impact has the coronavirus had on the operation of these shelters, and can the women who would normally go to these shelters continue to go, or is it or not?
Sure. So I spoke with a Safe Place for Help that's in Lake County. It's one of the only shelters in Lake County. They saw an 158% increase in victims coming to seek services in shelter. And so this was dramatic, and they had to scramble to figure out how to serve these people. They had a bill of $65,000 just in 1 month to serve their increased population. Damaris Lorta, the Chief Development Officer at A Safe Place for Help, has worked there for 8 years, and this is the largest number of clients she served at one time. So it's definitely seen a lot of impact in the shelters in the Chicagoland area.
Those shelters are not known for having a lot of money in the bank. How are they affording the $65,000 increase in operational costs?
So I was talking with a Safe Place for Help, and they've been able to put together a piecemeal of grants together, but it's a full-time job just trying to apply for grants and be able to fund operations, especially since things are way more expensive now because they're serving more people.
When we are looking at the impact of the coronavirus on domestic violence victims, Do we see more people going to the hospital? Is there any way of knowing, in other words, and you mentioned at the top the number of reported cases is down, but that's because,
Hmm.
not to say violence is down, but the
Hmm.
communication lines are down.
Hmm.
Is there any way of knowing if violence has increased, if more people are at risk? Were you able to ascertain any of that?
So with talking with Damaris Lorta, she let me know that some people are coming from directly to the shelter from hospitals because of violence and not because of coronavirus. And I'm sure many victims are nervous to even go to the hospital because it is such because of the coronavirus. So it's there. The hospitals are definitely dealing with the increase in violence.
In the article we're going to have on the IllinoisChannel.org, you talked to a victim of domestic violence, and you changed her name. So I
Yes.
believe is it Gomez is the last name that you're referring to this
Mm-hmm.
individual as, not the real name. But what did she tell you, and what did you learn from her experience?
Sure. So she was actually able to leave her home to report her case just before the stay-at-home order was put into effect. So she was able to get what she needed to get done right before the stay-at-home order. But that did leave her with the fallout in the stay-at-home order. So she was out of work because of coronavirus, or where she worked had closed, and she was now a stay-at-home mom and trying to piecemeal together funds to keep them afloat. They were able to delay paying rent, but she was on the verge of having to pay 3 months up front, and she had no idea how she was going to be able to do that. The stimulus check did help her for a little bit, but she's still trying to figure it out. Um, and she's also still nervous for her partner, for her ex-partner, because he is in jail at the moment, as their case is progressing slowly through court, and he's still at risk for coronavirus. So it's been a journey for her. She's trying to be there as best she can for her kids, and still trying to heal herself.
This was one of the things, as we said off the top, that is not necessarily as evident right off the top. We said the economy is rather obvious, but how did you happen to come upon this as a topic and discover this as what I would say is somewhat of a submerged issue?
Mm-hmm. Well, when the stay-at-home order was put in place, when the shelter-in-place order was put in place, I immediately thought of the people who were not necessarily, where home wasn't the safest place. We consider when there's a pandemic that home is the cleanest and where you can find refuge, but home necessarily doesn't mean refuge for some people. And I felt like it was necessary to shed light on this issue.
And for those who might be impacted at this point, who might be a domestic violence victim, is there anything that the professionals you've talked to in the field are saying? What can they do, or is there a way they can their report the violence that's happening to them? Is there anything
Mm-hmm.
that they can do? Is there room in the shelters, or are they all filled?
Mm-hmm. So, what the people I spoke with told me is that the best tactic to reach out for help is to call their services when you're getting groceries. Grocery time is the most easily excusable time to be out of the house, and when you come back with groceries, there's typically less questions asked from the abusive partner. So that was the advice they kind of passed to me to pass along to potential victims, and hopefully, shelters will be able to accommodate for the increase.
And the thing is that a lot of times the abusers are just totally controlling. So it's hard for, you mentioned in your article, it's hard for the victims a lot of times to be free and get away from, physically get away, especially now, to
Mm-hmm.
make a phone call. So I think you said in your article the one of the victims wasn't even allowed to have a phone. And
Mm-hmm.
it goes to show that the level of control the abuser was having over the victim. So As far as room in the shelters, though, I mean, if they report it, can they come in to escape the violence?
I believe that the shelters do coordinate, so if there isn't room in one, they will be able to find somewhere for you to
And
go.
of course, the other thing is, in many cases, these women are going to have young children. That
Right.
also complicates it. Do these shelters take their children in?
They do, up until a certain age, they do.
Okay. Nicole Girten, we thanks for joining us on the Illinois Channel. A fascinating topic, a sad one, one we hate to see, but certainly we can understand when people are locked up together, when there's already violence going on in the relationship. We can just imagine how being locked up for months together could lead to an increase in that violence. So we hope anyone who hears this or is a victim of domestic violence can reach out, find a way to get help. And Nicole Girten, thank you again for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.